weapon and the military necessity for that suffering. The key question was proportionality. A weapon was not illegal simply because it was effective at killing. Killing enemy combatants was the fundamental purpose of combat. Any weapon that achieved this purpose efficiently was legitimate unless it caused suffering disproportionate to military objectives. Ansel examined the shotgun's effects objectively. Each double-aught buckshot pellet was approximately .33 caliber. This was comparable to pistol ammunition and smaller than standard rifle bullets. The pellets were round lead balls, not designed to fragment or expand. They created clean wound channels similar to any other projectile. Yes, a soldier hit by multiple pellets would suffer multiple wounds, but each individual wound was no more severe than a pistol or rifle wound. The cumulative effect might be more lethal, but that was the point. Killing the enemy was legitimate. A weapon was not objectionable merely because it was good at its job. Ansel then turned to German hypocrisy. He documented German weapons that clearly caused unnecessary suffering. Poison gas had been introduced by Germany at Ypres in April 1915. Chlorine gas caused victims to suffocate as their lungs filled with fluid. Death took minutes to hours and was agonizing. Germany had used phosgene gas and mustard gas, both designed to cause maximum suffering. Germany had deployed flamethrowers that burned soldiers alive. Germany had used sawtooth bayonets specifically designed to cause ragged wounds that were difficult to treat. Germany had bombarded civilian population centers with artillery and Zeppelin airships. And now Germany claimed to be concerned about unnecessary suffering caused by shotguns? Ansel noted that in 1899, at the First Hague Conference, the United States delegation had proposed adding specific language to Article 23, prohibiting certain types of ammunition. The proposal would have banned exploding bullets and other projectiles designed to cause unnecessarily cruel wounds. Germany had opposed this proposal. Germany argued against creating a specific list of prohibited weapons. Now, 19 years later, Germany was claiming that shotguns should be prohibited under the very article they had helped keep deliberately vague. The memorandum concluded that the German protest was without legal merit. It would be ill-founded coming from an enemy whose conduct had evidenced the highest regard for the laws of war. Coming from Germany, it was destitute of all good faith. The protest was pure propaganda, designed to undermine American morale and create diplomatic friction. It deserved to be rejected completely. Assistant Secretary of War Benedict Crowell added his own opinion. Crowell, who would later become president of the National Rifle Association, wrote that he was at a loss to see any plausible basis for the German protest. The shotgun was an ancient and approved weapon. Its effectiveness at killing combatants was not a legal problem. The killing of combatants was not only lawful but one of the chief means of warfare. No weapon could be objectionable merely because of its capacity to kill. Secretary Lansing sent the official reply to Germany on September 28, 1918. The timing was significant. Germany had demanded a response before October 1st. Lansing deliberately waited until the legal analysis was complete, and then responded with a document that was both diplomatically correct and strategically aggressive. The reply was direct and uncompromising. The United States rejected the German protest entirely. The shotgun did not violate the Hague Convention. International law permitted weapons that killed efficiently. The shotgun was no different from any other lethal weapon in its fundamental effect. It removed enemy soldiers from combat. That was its purpose. That was the purpose of all weapons. The United States would not discontinue use of a weapon that gave American soldiers a tactical advantage simply because Germany found it inconvenient. Then Lansing addressed the German threat directly. His language was carefully chosen. He wrote that if the German government carried out its threat to execute American soldiers captured with shotguns, the United States would make such reprisals as would best protect American forces. This was diplomatic code for retaliation in kind. If Germany executed American prisoners of war, the United States would execute German prisoners. The threat was clear enough that Germany could not misunderstand it, but indirect enough to maintain diplomatic protocol. Lansing sent copies of his reply to Allied governments. This was strategic messaging. The United States wanted Britain, France, and Italy to see that America was not intimidated by German threats. The reply demonstrated American resolve. It showed that the United States would defend its soldiers' right to use effective weapons, and it exposed German hypocrisy for the propaganda it was. The German government received Lansing's reply in early October 1918. They did not respond. No counter-argument, no further protest. Complete silence. The diplomatic exchange was over. More importantly, no American soldier was ever executed for carrying a shotgun. The German threat proved empty. It had always been empty. Germany had no intention of executing American prisoners over shotguns. The threat was psychological warfare designed to create hesitation and doubt. It failed. The truth was that the Germans feared the shotguns because they were effective. Combat reports from German units facing American forces consistently mentioned the shotguns as a significant threat. German soldiers who survived encounters with shotgun-armed Americans described them as terrifying. The psychological impact was as important as the physical damage. German after-action reports from units in contact with American forces described the shotgun's effect on German tactical doctrine. Standard German assault tactics relied on stormtroopers closing to grenade range, then following up with rifle fire and bayonet charges. These tactics had worked against British and French forces for years, but against Americans with shotguns, the tactics failed. German soldiers attempting to close within 30 meters faced devastating fire that hit multiple men with each shot. The carefully rehearsed assault formations became killing zones. German soldiers wrote letters home, describing the American shotguns. These letters, intercepted by Allied intelligence, revealed the psychological effect of the weapon. Soldiers described feeling helpless against an enemy who could fire so rapidly with such widespread effect. The sound of the shotgun was distinctive, deeper than a rifle, more threatening. When German soldiers heard that sound in a trench, they knew they faced a weapon they could not counter effectively. Some letters described abandoning defensive positions rather than face American shotgun assaults. The effectiveness of the shotguns was documented in American combat reports from multiple divisions. These reports provide concrete evidence of the weapon's tactical impact. The 82nd Division reported that shotguns were valuable for patrol work and recommended that 200 be issued per division. This was a significant increase from the initial allocation of 10 to 20 per regiment. The recommendation came from frontline officers who had seen the weapon in action. The 5th Infantry Division provided the most detailed assessment. They reported that shotguns were very useful in trench warfare, for scouting and patrol parties, and for mopping up operations after initial assaults. Mopping up meant clearing dugouts, bunkers, and trench sections where enemy soldiers might be hiding. This was dangerous work. Soldiers had to enter confined spaces where enemies could be waiting in ambush. The shotgun gave American soldiers decisive advantage in these situations. One man with a shotgun could clear a dugout that might require 3 or 4 riflemen. The 35th Division recommended issuing 50 shotguns per regiment, with specific allocation to combat companies at the front. They noted that while shotguns were advantageous for trench warfare, they were an unnecessary burden for open warfare, where engagement ranges exceeded the shotgun's effective distance. This assessment was tactically sophisticated. The division understood that the shotgun was a specialized weapon, not a universal replacement for the rifle, but in the right tactical situation, it was unmatched. Some divisions reported limitations. The 77th Division noted that shotguns were useful in trenches but not well suited for fighting in open terrain. The paper-hulled ammunition was particularly problematic. In the wet conditions of French trenches, paper shells absorbed moisture and swelled. Swollen shells jammed in the chamber or failed to feed from the magazine tube. Soldiers reported that ammunition reliability was the main weakness of the system, not the gun itself. The Winchester Model 1897 was mechanically reliable even in harsh conditions, but the ammunition let it down. American Ordnance Department records show that, by September 1918, 7,425 shotguns were deployed in France. This represented a significant increase from the initial 1,000 combat weapons allocated for testing in early 1918. The expansion demonstrated institutional acceptance of the weapon. The Army had moved beyond experimental use to standardized deployment across multiple divisions. The shotgun had proven itself in combat and was being integrated into American tactical doctrine. Despite these limitations, the shotguns proved effective enough that demand increased. More units requested them. By September 1918, approximately 40 American combat battalions were equipped with shotguns. Not every soldier carried one. Typically, 1 or 2 men per squad had shotguns. The rest carried rifles. The shotgun men were used for specific tasks: point man on patrols, lead man in trench assaults, sentry duty, any situation where close-range firepower was needed. One of the most effective uses was in combined arms tactics. American infantry learned to coordinate shotguns with rifles and automatic weapons. The rifles provided long-range fire. The machine guns suppressed enemy positions. The shotgun men cleared trenches and bunkers. This combination was devastatingly effective. German defences that had held against British and French attacks for years were broken by American combined arms tactics that included shotguns as a key element. The Battle of Belleau Wood in June 1918 demonstrated the shotgun's effectiveness. American Marines and Army units attacked German positions in dense forest. Fighting was at close range. Visibility was limited. The shotguns were perfect for this environment. Captain J. H. Hoskins, an American engineering officer, described a German attack that was broken by shotgun fire. He told a Nashville newspaper that the shotgun volley was new to the Germans. Every time a gun fired, 3 or 4 Germans went down. The surprise gripped them. The closer they huddled, the deadlier was the fire. Sergeant Lloyd Seibert of the 364th Infantry, 91st Division, received the Medal of Honor for actions on September 26, 1918, near Epinonville, France. Seibert was suffering from illness but remained with his platoon. He led his men under heavy shell and machine gun fire. With 2 other soldiers, he charged a German machine gun emplacement. Seibert killed 1 German with his shotgun and captured 2 others. He was wounded in the action but continued fighting. When his unit withdrew, he helped carry wounded comrades. Later that evening, he volunteered to bring in more wounded until he fainted from exhaustion. The Medal of Honor citation specifically mentioned that he used a shotgun. This was the highest recognition of the weapon's combat effectiveness. The German protest had an unintended consequence. It drew attention to the shotguns. American quote, "Newspapers published stories about the German complaint. The stories portrayed the shotguns as a wonder weapon that terrified the enemy. Public interest increased. More Americans learned about the trench guns. The publicity created a legend that would outlast the war. The statistical impact was clear. In divisions that used shotguns extensively, casualty rates in close combat decreased. Trench clearing operations that previously took hours were completed in minutes. German counterattacks that relied on stormtroopers rushing American positions were stopped more effectively. The weapon's tactical value was undeniable. The German protest came in September 1918. The war ended November 11, 1918. Only 2 months later, Germany surrendered before the shotgun issue could be resolved. The diplomatic exchange became a footnote in the larger story of the war's end. But the effectiveness of the weapon had been proven. The Germans would not have protested if the Pullman 2 NTA shotguns were not working. After the war, the United States military kept the shotguns in active inventory. They remained standard-issue equipment through World War II. The tactical lessons learned in French trenches from 1917 to 1918 proved applicable to jungle warfare in the Pacific Theater 25 years later. American forces fighting Japanese troops in New Guinea, Guadalcanal, and the Philippines used Winchester Model 1897s and other combat shotguns for clearing bunkers, caves, and jungle defensive positions. The weapon's effectiveness in close quarters had not diminished. Marine Corps units fighting on Pacific islands found shotguns particularly valuable. Japanese defensive tactics emphasized fortified positions, bunkers, and caves. Assaulting these positions required weapons effective at very close range. The shotgun's ability to deliver multiple projectiles with one shot made it ideal for clearing confined spaces where multiple defenders might be present. Marines conducting cave-clearing operations typically assigned one shotgun per assault team. The shotgun man led the entry, followed by riflemen who provided backup. The Korean War saw continued use of combat shotguns. American and United Nations forces fighting Chinese and North Korean troops encountered trench warfare conditions similar to World War I, particularly during static defensive periods. Shotguns were issued for trench defense, patrol work, and clearing operations. The Winchester Model 1897 was still in limited use, though newer models like the Ithaca 37 and Winchester Model 12 had become more common. Vietnam represented perhaps the most extensive combat use of shotguns since World War I. The Remington 870 became the standard military shotgun, though Winchester Model 1897s were still present in small numbers. American forces used shotguns for jungle patrol, ambush defense, point puttis, security, and firebase defense. Special Forces units particularly valued shotguns. Navy SEALs conducting riverine operations used shotguns for close-quarters engagements. Army Special Forces teams used them for compound defense and village clearing operations. The tactical role of the shotgun evolved with each conflict, but the fundamental principle remained constant. In any combat environment where engagement ranges were short and multiple targets might be present, the shotgun provided advantages that rifles could not match. One shot could engage multiple enemies. No precision aiming was required. The psychological effect of the weapon's distinctive sound and visible damage remained significant. These characteristics that made the shotgun effective in French trenches in 1918 made it equally effective in Vietnamese villages 50 years later. The Winchester Model 1897 that started it all remained in limited military service until the 1960s. Some were still being used by rear area security forces and military police units. The design proved so durable that civilian versions continued to be manufactured until 1957. Over 1 million Model 1897s were produced in total. John Moses Browning, who designed the Winchester Model 1897, died in 1926. He never saw how significant his shotgun design would become for military use. Browning designed dozens of firearms during his career, including machine guns, automatic pistols, and rifles that changed warfare. But the Model 1897 shotgun, originally designed for duck hunting, became one of the most feared weapons of the First World War because it solved a specific problem that no one else had addressed effectively. William Eager, who proposed adapting shotguns for trench warfare, served as an officer in the United States Navy during the war. He never received official recognition for his idea. His engineering report was filed away in War Department archives. No medal, no commendation, no public acknowledgement. Peter Carney, editor of the National Sports Syndicate, wrote in 1918 that Eager was, in large measure, responsible for the defeat of Germany's armies. This was an exaggeration. But Eager had contributed something significant. He had identified a tactical problem and proposed a solution that worked. General John Pershing, who approved the use of shotguns in France, retired from the army in 1924. He wrote his memoirs but made only passing reference to the shotguns. For Pershing, they were one small part of a larger effort to modernize American infantry tactics, but Pershing understood their value. He had seen them work in the Philippines against Moro fighters who used close combat tactics. He recognized that trenches in France presented similar tactical challenges. Robert Lansing, who rejected the German protest, served as Secretary of State until 1920. His handling of the shotgun protest was a minor incident in his tenure. Lansing dealt with much larger issues, including negotiating the Treaty of Versailles and establishing the League of Nations. But his response to Germany was significant. He defended the right of American soldiers to use weapons that gave them a tactical advantage. He refused to be intimidated by German threats, His message was clear. The United States would fight the war using whatever weapons were most effective. The German soldiers who faced the shotguns never forgot them. After the war, veterans wrote memoirs that mentioned the American trench guns. These memoirs described the shotgun as more frightening than other weapons because it made defense impossible. With a machine gun, soldiers could take cover. With artillery, they could dig deeper. With gas, they could wear masks. But with a shotgun in a trench at close range, there was no defense. The soldier with the shotgun had absolute dominance. German veterans returning from France described to their families the psychological impact of facing American shotguns. The weapon's effectiveness was not just physical but mental. German soldiers who had survived years of combat, who had faced artillery barrages and gas attacks and machine gun fire, said that nothing compared to the helplessness of facing shotguns in trenches. The speed of the weapon's effect, the impossibility of dodging the spread of pellets, the knowledge that one American with a shotgun could kill an entire squad in seconds. These memories stayed with survivors long after the war ended. The lesson of the shotgun controversy was not about weapons technology. It was about tactical adaptation. The Germans had spent 4 years fighting in trenches. They had developed extensive doctrine for trench warfare. They had trained stormtrooper units specifically for trench assault. They had perfected the tactics. But they had not considered using shotguns because shotguns were not a traditional military weapon in European armies. Shotguns were for hunting, not warfare. The Americans looked at the same problem with fresh eyes. They had no investment in traditional European military doctrine. They asked what weapon would work best in a trench. The answer was obvious once you asked the question. A weapon that fired multiple projectiles in a spread pattern, a weapon that could be fired rapidly, a weapon that was effective at 5 to 20 meters. The shotgun met all these requirements. It had been available the entire time. The British and French could have used shotguns. They chose not to. The Americans chose differently. The shotgun controversy revealed fundamental differences in how American and European military establishments approached warfare. European armies in 1917 operated within centuries of military tradition. Weapons, tactics, and doctrine evolved incrementally. Innovation happened, but it happened slowly and within established frameworks. The rifle was the infantryman's weapon. Machine guns supported infantry. Artillery prepared attacks. These were established principles based on decades of experience. American military doctrine in 1917 was less bound by tradition. The United States Army was small before the war, only about 127,000 men in 1916. When America entered the war in April 1917, the Army expanded rapidly to 4 million men by November 1918. This massive expansion meant that most American soldiers and many officers had no pre-war military experience. They had not been trained in traditional European military doctrine. This lack of institutional tradition was actually an advantage when it came to tactical innovation. American officers and enlisted men looked at trench warfare as a practical problem, requiring practical solutions. What weapon works best in a trench? The shotgun. Why was the shotgun not being used? Because European armies did not traditionally use shotguns in warfare. Was this a good reason? No. Traditional practice was not automatically correct practice. The Americans were willing to question assumptions that European armies took for granted. This willingness to question tradition extended beyond weapons to tactics and organization. American divisions were larger than European divisions, roughly 28,000 men compared to 15 to 18,000 for British, French, or German divisions. American doctrine emphasized offensive action and firepower over defensive positions. American training focused on marksmanship and individual initiative rather than rigid adherence to orders. These differences reflected American military culture, which valued practical results over formal correctness. The shotgun exemplified this cultural difference. From a traditional European military perspective, the shotgun was inappropriate. It was a hunting weapon. It lacked range and penetration. It could not be used in bayonet charges effectively. It did not fit into established tactical formations. But from an American practical perspective, none of these objections mattered. The shotgun killed enemy soldiers in trenches more effectively than rifles. That was the only criterion that mattered. German military culture valued precision, discipline, and adherence to doctrine. German stormtrooper tactics represented the perfection of traditional military values. Small unit leaders were highly trained specialists. They executed complex assault plans with precision timing. They followed doctrine that had been developed through careful analysis and field testing. This system worked extraordinarily well. German stormtroopers were arguably the most effective infantry in the war, but the system assumed that all participants followed similar doctrinal frameworks. When Americans appeared with weapons and tactics that ignored established conventions, the German system struggled to adapt. The shotgun was effective precisely because it did not fit into established tactical frameworks. It was not a weapon that could be countered with better training or modified tactics. It was simply more effective than rifles at close range. The only counter would have been for Germany to develop their own combat shotguns. But this would have required acknowledging that American unconventional approach was correct, which German military pride resisted. The diplomatic protest was Germany's attempt to use international law to counter American tactical innovation. If shotguns could be declared illegal, Germany would not need to develop countermeasures or modify tactics. The problem would be solved through legal means rather than military adaptation. This revealed something important about institutional thinking. When an organization encounters a challenge that does not fit its existing frameworks, the instinct is often to reject the challenge as illegitimate rather than adapt to it. Germany's protest was this instinct expressed in diplomatic form. Today, combat shotguns remain in use by military forces worldwide. Modern shotguns are more advanced than the Winchester Model 1897. They have higher capacity magazines, more durable construction, and better ammunition. But the basic concept is unchanged. A shoulder-fired weapon that fires multiple projectiles in a spread pattern, optimized for close-range combat. The tactical problem that William Eager identified in 1917 still exists. Soldiers still fight in buildings, tunnels, and confined spaces where engagement ranges are measured in meters, not hundreds of meters. In those environments, the shotgun remains the most effective weapon. The Winchester Model 1897, that terrified German soldiers in 1918, is now a collector's item. Original military-marked trench guns in good condition sell for thousands of dollars. Museums display them as artifacts of the First World War. Veterans organizations preserve them as reminders of American ingenuity. But the real legacy is not the physical weapon. It is the lesson it taught. Innovation in warfare does not always require inventing something new. Sometimes it requires recognizing that an existing tool can be applied to a new problem. The shotgun was not new. Trench warfare was not new. But combining them was innovative because no one had done it before. The Germans protested because they recognized this innovation was working. Their protest was the highest compliment they could give to the weapon's effectiveness. The German hatred of American shotguns was not really about the shotguns. It was about losing the tactical advantage. For 4 years, Germany had controlled trench warfare. German soldiers knew how to fight in trenches better than anyone. Then the Americans showed up with a weapon that negated that expertise. German stormtroopers who had trained for years in trench assault tactics found themselves outmatched by American soldiers with a few weeks of training and a shotgun. That was humiliating. The protest was an attempt to regain lost prestige by delegitimizing the weapon. It failed because the weapon was legitimate and effective. German military intelligence understood this clearly. Their own analysis, conducted after examining the captured shotgun on July 21, 1918, confirmed what their soldiers reported from the front. The American shotgun was not a terror weapon. It was not designed to cause unnecessary suffering. It was simply the most effective tool for close-quarters trench combat. And that effectiveness was precisely what made it dangerous. The Germans protested not because the shotgun violated the laws of war or caused unnecessary suffering, but because it gave American soldiers a decisive advantage in close combat. It allowed inexperienced American troops to compete with veteran German stormtroopers and win. It changed the tactical balance in trenches, and there was nothing Germany could do to counter it except protest. The protest failed, the shotguns stayed, and American soldiers continued using them for the rest of the war and beyond. If you found this story compelling, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the wars that shaped our world. Subscribe to stay connected with history that matters. And leave a comment below telling us where you are watching from. Our community spans from soldiers to students, from veterans to history enthusiasts. Thank you for watching.